All right, welcome back to our Wednesday night Bible study. We have been looking at the life of Judah, or at least one aspect of Judah's life. We've taken a break from, for the moment, the life of Joseph. And in chapter 38, we're looking at the life of Judah, at least one major event in his life. Now, what we've seen last week was Judah ends up marrying a Canaanite woman, and he has 3 boys. And the oldest son, he gives to a woman named Tamar. And they marry. But is wicked in God's eyes, and so God kills him. He takes him off this planet. So Onan is the next in line, and so Judah gives Onan to Tamar in order to perform what's called the Levirate marriage. That is, the brother was to raise up a child, just one male offspring, in the name of the deceased brother. And so that deceased brother's lineage would continue to go on. Well, Onan is wicked in God's eyes. He does not do this. He does not perform this very honorable and important role. He simply uses Tamar like a prostitute. He's willing to have sexual relations with her, but he will not allow her to conceive. So God kills him. Now Judah probably has no clue that this is God in the midst of all of this. And he may very well be thinking that Tamar is to blame. Is something wrong with her? Is she cursed? Who knows? Is something wrong? But he promises that he will give Tamar his youngest son when he's old enough, because his youngest son isn't old enough yet to get married and do this. So he's basically postponing this. He just wants her to go away, really. And so time goes by. Judah's wife ends up dying. He mourns her, and then he gets up and gets on with the work that he has to do. So he's going to go check out his shearers, his sheep shearers. So he travels off with a friend of his. And Tamar hears that Judah is coming out. Well, she knows that he is not going to give her the younger son. She just knows it. And probably because he's well past the age of marriage. That's probably how she knows. And so she's going to go out and she's going to meet her father-in-law dressed as a prostitute. And she does. She meets him on the road. He thinks she's a cult prostitute, which has all kinds of, those are all kinds of problematic implications that go along with that. He wants to have sexual relations with this cult prostitute, doesn't know it's his daughter-in-law, Tamar. And she says, okay, but you got to give me, I need to get paid. He says, I'll give you a goat. She says, all right, but I need a pledge. I need some insurance that you're going to come back to me, right? Would have been very common if these cult prostitutes did not receive some kind of pledge, insurance, some down payment that people would just, they'd have sexual relations with them and never come back. And never, why bother, right? No reason to be honorable. So she gets a pledge from him. He says, what do you want? She says, well, I'll take your cord, your staff, and your signet. Now, these are 3 things that are going to clearly and unmistakably identify that this is Judah. These belong to Judah. Anybody who sees these is going to recognize that, these are the things that identify him. And so he says, okay, that's fine. And he does. Now, that's pretty much where we left it off last week. So let's look now. We're going to read verses 20 through 30. So we'll pick up in chapter 38, and we'll read verses 20 through verse 30. It says this. When Judah sent the young goat by his friend, the Adulamite, to take back the pledge from the woman's hand, he did not find her. And he asked the men of the place, "Where is the cult prostitute who was at Anan?" at the roadside. And they said, no cult prostitute has been here. So he returned to Judah and said, I have not found her. Also, the men of the place said, no cult prostitute has been here. And Judah replied, well, let her keep the things as her own, or we shall be laughed at. You see, I sent this young goat, and you did not find her. About 3 months later, Judah was told, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has been immoral. Moreover, she is pregnant by immorality. And Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. As she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, by the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant. And he said, and she said, please identify whose these are, the signet and the cord and the staff. And Judah identified them and said, she is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah. And he did not know her again. When the time of her labor came, there were twins in her womb. And when she was in labor, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, this one came out first. But as he drew back his hand, behold, his brother came out. And she said, what a breach you have made for yourself. Therefore, his name was called Perez. Afterward, his brother came out with the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. All right, so Judah, in verse 20, he tries to do the honorable thing, right? Honorable. Well, put that in a question mark, right? He tries to do the honorable thing and send the goat, right? He sends back the pledge to this cult prostitute, and he wants to collect his items, right? Give the trade, give her the goat, and take back these things. But the friend can't find the prostitute. In fact, the men of the area say that there's no cult prostitute around here, right? So according to the people of that area and that city, there is no cult prostitute. Well, his friend comes back and says, I couldn't find her. She's not around, you know, and the people say there is none. So Judah leaves it alone. Now, he leaves it alone because he doesn't want to be considered a laughing stock, right? So he leaves it alone and he moves on with his life. And he probably, very likely, forgets this whole thing. He's got other things to deal with, so I'm sure life goes on. This was not a big deal to him, so he forgets the whole thing. Now, what happens with Tamar? Well, she's pregnant. She's pregnant. And after a couple months, right, it says 3 months, she is starting to show. And so people are taking notice of this. She's not married. And in fact, she was supposed to be waiting for the final son of Judah. And she was supposed to remain as a widow until he was old enough. So it gets back, right? Verse 24 actually says that she has been immoral. This translation says immoral. It's not just that she's been sexually immoral, right? Fornication or something like that. But the phrase actually carries the idea of prostitution. She's a prostitute. She's pregnant because she has been prostituting herself. Remember I said to keep an eye on that. There's this repeated theme of prostitution that seems to come up here. So what is Judah's response to this, though, right? What's his response? Is he going to respond with concern? Is he going to, maybe talk with her and find out what's going on, what happened? Well, his response is, I want you to bring her out, and I want to burn her alive, right? Bring her out. We're going to burn her alive. That's pretty harsh. That's pretty harsh. What does Tamar do? Well, of course, she sends Judah the signet, the cord, and the staff. And she wants him to identify. All right? She says, I'm pregnant by the guy who these things belong to. And I want you to identify whose they belong to, right? This is a little bit of a kind of a slap in the face. This is like she knows who they belong to, and she says, I want you to identify who these belong to. This is who I'm pregnant by. So he gets these things, and it's unmistakable. Again, these things would have been clearly, they would have clearly identified who they belong to. And Judah is now reminded, when he sees these things, he's now reminded of what he did and how he couldn't find that shrine prostitute, right? That cult prostitute. So he knows whose these belong to. And he says to her, he says, she's more righteous than I am because I didn't give her my youngest son. Now, this does not mean, he's not saying that what she did glorified God, right? He's not saying that. In fact, we know Judah is not a man who is glorifying God in his activities, right? God nowhere says that this is a good thing. God nowhere tells Tamar to do this, right? This is just something that these people have done. Both Judah has done what he's done and Tamar has done what he's done. Judah isn't a very righteous guy anyways, right? What he's saying with all of this is, I should have given her my son. I should have done the honorable thing culturally. I should have kept my promise and done what I was supposed to do, but I didn't. So she's more in the right than I am, in a sense, right? She did the culturally maybe the more honorable thing. I think it's worth taking a moment and thinking about what Judah did and how he reacted. Now, when Judah goes out to see his shearers, after his wife died, he goes out and he notices that there is a shrine prostitute. He has no problem. He has no problem whatsoever sleeping with a cult prostitute. He has no problem, right? So he doesn't have a problem committing fornication. He has no problem committing spiritual and religious adultery and, being involved in pagan worship, which again was part of what was going on with the cult prostitution. So he's fine with going to a prostitute, but he's angry. And he's ready to kill Tamar, burn her alive, because she was accused of being a prostitute. Now, he doesn't know for sure. She's just, clearly she's pregnant, so she got pregnant somehow. And the accusation is she's done it by prostitution. But he doesn't have all the facts. But anyways, he's willing to kill her for prostituting herself. This right here is what Jesus meant when he talked about judging others. You remember, that very famous passage, judge not lest you be judged, right? Don't go around judging others, because with the same judgment, the standards you use to judge others, you yourself will be judged. He's talking about hypocritical judgment. Jesus says, why do you worry about the speck in your brother's eye when you got a log in your own, right? The concept is sin and wanting to help, in quotes, right? Wanting to help the other person get the speck out of their eye when you yourself are in far more trouble. You've got a log in your eye. That's what Jesus is talking about. And here we have a great example of that. We've got Judah, who is willing to judge harshly Tamar for something he himself was perfectly fine being involved with. He had absolutely no problem doing and being involved with the very same thing that she was accused of. This is hypocritical judgment. There's a similar event in the life of King David. Now, you remember King David, he ends up having sexual relations, right? He commits adultery with Bathsheba, who is the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Uriah the Hittite is one of David's mighty men. He was very respectful, honorable, loyal to the king, and yet David is willing to do this. So he takes Bathsheba, has relations with her, she becomes pregnant. He tries to hide it. So not only does he commit adultery, he's going to try to hide it, be deceptive and deceitful and all of that. Ultimately, he finds out he can't get away with it or hide it the way he wants to, so he has Uriah killed. Well, you remember that the prophet comes to David, and the prophet tells David a story about a man who acts wickedly. And David gets angry, and he wants to have this guy taken care of. He's willing to take care of this guy who wronged another person in the same way that David had wronged, right? Very similar way that David had wronged. And then the prophet reveals, you are the man. You have done this. And of course, it's in a bit of a parable. But the point is, you're willing to judge harshly, hypocritically, someone else who has done what you've done. You got no problem being willing to kill someone else for doing the very same thing you have done. Very easy to play the holier-than-thou card when you yourself are guilty of the same crime. Almost gives you a little bit of moral leverage. If nobody knows what you're doing and you come down hard on other people for doing the same thing, well, maybe people won't think that you have done that. That might be what's going on when people judge hypocritically like that. But it's ungodly. It shouldn't be going on. Again, it almost gives this air of righteousness and holiness. Now, Judah doesn't kill Tamar, and he says she's more righteous than I, right? She's in the right. She's more in the right than me. I should have given her my younger son so that she could have a child through him. She's done this. It's all deceptive and all that, but she's a better person than I am, is pretty much what he's saying. So he doesn't kill her, but notice that it says he doesn't lay with her anymore, right? He doesn't know her anymore. So he's not going to have relations with her ever again. But she does have 2 sons. And from this union, very interesting, from this union, we have the lineage of Jesus. Jesus comes from this line. Matthew chapter 1 and verse 3 says, and Judah, the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar, and Perez, the father of Hezron. Then it goes through the whole lineage. So this union God uses to bring about the Messiah through this lineage. So very interesting, very interesting. It's not through Judah's other son, that younger son. We have no clue what happened to that younger son. He's simply mentioned by name and then move on, nothing more. So what have we seen here in this chapter? Well, we've seen a lot of wickedness going on, and we've seen how someone can do some wicked things, some sinful things, and yet come down hard on other people who do those very same things or do those similar things, right? So prostitution. Judah was perfectly fine with having sexual relations with a cult prostitute, but oh no, if Tamar was, doing prostitution, then it's horrible and we're going to burn her alive. Yeah, hypocritical judgment there. So that's probably one of the big things we see. There's also this repeated theme of prostitution throughout. I believe that Onan is treating Tamar like a prostitute. Then she actually puts on the clothes of a prostitute. She kind of plays the role of one, though she's not trying to be a prostitute. She is just trying to get a child, and is trying to do it through the line that, from her husband who died. But not saying that what she did was right. Not saying that what she did was right. But she's really not playing a prostitute. That wasn't her purpose. But she plays the role of a prostitute. And, of course, Judah is willing to have sexual relations with a prostitute. And then later on, she is said to be involved in prostitution. So there's this theme that runs throughout all of this. Has Judah learned any lessons from this? Has Judah grown? Is God using these wicked events? Not that God is causing these events, but is God using these events in the life of Judah to teach him something? Maybe. And something to think about as we move on. Now, we're going to end here tonight, and we'll pick up next week in chapter 39, and we're going to return to the life of Joseph. So we took a bit of a detour here, but now we're going to look at the life of Joseph again. So God bless you. We'll see you next week.